ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence the Friday Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. We've been reading from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950. A compilation of all the questions on the subject matter of Atma Vichara put to Bhagavan between 1900 to 1950 and Bhagavan's answers to that. And it has been compiled by our founder president Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. Today I will be reading randomly from the section 1900 to 1935, and we will contemplate on Bhagavan's Upadesham, and then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara practice. Following that, our president Sarada Akka would be contemplating on self-enquiry as it has been captured in Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni, which is also in the form of a question and answers, but it has been compiled in Sanskrit. Then finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. Today, we will be looking at the 76th question that has been put to Bhagavan in the section of 1900 to 1935, that is between 1900 to 1935. So the question is, there are said to be 6 organs of different colors in the chest, of which the heart is said to be 2 fingers breadth to the right of the middle line. But the heart is also formless. Should we then imagine it to have a shape and meditate on it? Is the question. So there is an organ which is being claimed here, which is of different colors, which is in the chest, and the spiritual heart is 2 fingers to the right of the middle line. So, but the heart is, since it's a formless organ that which we are talking about, should we imagine it and have a shape and meditate on it? Is the question. Bhagavan's answer is no. Only the quest, who am I, is necessary. What remains all through deep sleep and waking is the same. But in waking, there is unhappiness and the effort to remove it. Asked who wakes up from sleep, you say I. If it is done If it is done, the eternal being will reveal itself. Investigation of I is the point and not meditation on the heart center. This is Bhagavan's Upadesha. So Bhagavan is saying very categorically here, the I, the heart, and all of this is part after, all of this comes to us only when we are awake. We have no such quest, no such finding when we are in deep sleep. When the I is not there, there is no such question, no such body in which we find ourselves to be embodied, and we need to break that and get back to somewhere. This has been our experience, all of our experience in deep sleep. So in the deep sleep, when there is no mind, then there is no body, and there is no ego also, there is no individual identity also. When that is absent, we know that there is absolutely nothing to be done, nowhere to go. So Bhagavan is saying only in the waking we have this problem of the I, who feels he has a body, and Bhagavan very beautifully says this I is nothing but the mixture of the sentient and the insentient body, or insentient things, which may be mind. We feel mind is very sentient. No, it is just all nothing but jada, says Bhagavan. The whole of the intellect, the whole of the mind, the whole of the world, the whole of the body is all inert. We know that this body becomes inert. And we also see Bhagavan explaining in the death experience, especially of his father. He says that though they said that it is my father, till yesterday what was responding to when I called him father is not responding today. It may not be, it is certainly not the body. And we know when we see many death experience also, that the one which is cognizing everything, the one which is and cognizing everything, it is the common entity, whether it is in the waking, whether it is in the dream, or whether it is in the sleep. Because even in sleep, when we say there is no identity, no mind, no body, there has to be somebody present to cognize it, and therefore be a sort of, I would not use this term witness, but was aware of it. The same entity is aware when the dream happens, and we know we had created a world and we did many vyavaharas in it. The same entity is present now in the waking, when it is saying, I am an embodied person inside this body, I have a mind, I have an intellect, and I need to do something, and I need to get back to the spiritual heart, which is having which is in an imaginary thing in the chest, everything. Bhagavan is saying, whoever is making this claim, which was not there in the deep sleep, inquire about him. If he inquire, who is making this claim, the answer will be, it is for me. And therefore Bhagavan is asking, inquire, who am I? Only when we really question this wrong identity, this wrong imaginary thing, which is tying the sentient to the insentient, the body, or insentient things like the mind, only when we truly question, then we know that the insentient is all animated only by the presence of this sentient thing. That is the self which Bhagavan is talking about. And it cannot be revealed other than oneself investigating, because this sentient thing is not out there. It is something which we are all directly experiencing moment to moment. We cannot say when we don't know how we cognize, but we cognize. I cannot point to any object like the eyes or a nose to say this is what smells, this is what sees. We cannot say so. What knows within me? We cannot know, but we know that there is that experience. We know that we exist. So Bhagavan is asking, is that what you are really referring to as I? Because that very existence, that very being is what always is, whether it is the waking, dream, or the sleep. All these three states come and go, but that doesn't come or go because it is always there. It can clearly define what sleep is. It can clearly define what waking is. It can clearly define what dream is because it is all an object to it. The waking, the dream, and the sleep is only an object to it. But the subject, the one who is experiencing it, the one who was there to know it, is the unchanging truth. Only when we inquire who am I, then this wrong identity that we are taking ourselves to be this body, the mixture of sentient and the insentient, will be questioned. And only when we question, we wake up to that very natural truth of all of us, which is that we are that pure presence, we are that pure awareness in which nothing ever happened. And it always continues to be. And in the deep sleep, it continues to be. It is not panicked that the body is not there. It has not panicked the world is not there. It has not panicked that it has lost a name. It is beautiful, vast presence which is uninterruptedly going on. That is our real nature. Unless we inquire, question this imaginative thing which is in the waking, we will never recognize our true identity, says Bhagavan. Therefore, he says, no more imagination. Already there is enough imagination of being a body, being mindful or whatever it is, of being all intellect. Inquire to whom is this, who am I? There is no need to have one more imagination even in the spiritual journey of a heart or anything else, though it could be a very great aid for recognizing, for making the mind one-pointed by imagining something on the right side, some bright color thing. The mind may be made to focus and made one-pointed, which instead of running against many things. But that is not the whole purpose of spiritual sadhana, says Bhagavan. The world's purpose of spiritual sadhana is to recognize that natural presence, that natural conscious awareness, which is default our nature, which neither comes from any external association or goes away when the external association is lost. Like the external association of the body is lost, the mind is lost, the intellect is lost. But in deep sleep, we are very much there to see the loss of all of it, and yet we are not perturbed. So to recognize that natural truth, Bhagavan says, inquire. With the abundant grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, for the next 20 minutes, no matter how many thoughts come, no matter whatever is the nature of those thoughts, it is all nothing but something which is very objectively appearing to whom. That is what we need to inquire. Therefore, Bhagavan asks, to whom is this thought? Then the attention which was on the objective thing, the thought, is turned to the subject. oh, it is for me, I. And Bhagavan doesn't stop there. When we say I, we have naturally identified ourselves with this body. I am thinking, therefore it is me. Bhagavan doesn't stop there. He asks us, inquire, who am I? What do you really refer to as I? And when we truly inquire, what do I refer to as I find myself to be that ever present, ever aware, vast presence and awareness, nothing apart, no separateness there. That one truth alone is my nature. And by repeatedly inquiring and moving our attention from the objects to that pure truth, which is ourself, Bhagavan assures the truth alone remains and shines continuously, is found to be continuously present. Until such time, the practice has to be done because we have wrongly started attending to outward things. So the inquiry is a way Bhagavan has devised for all of us to establish again and again in that one simple truth, which is our very nature. With the abundant grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on verses from Ramana Gita. Ramana Gita is a compilation of questions by various seekers of truth and answers by Bhagavan to those questions, which have been classified into 18 chapters by Ganapati Muni and recorded in Sanskrit in the lines of the Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, this has 18 chapters, the Ramana Gita, but not as many verses as the Bhagavad Gita, far fewer. And we are now meditating on the verses of the 11th chapter. The 11th chapter is Jnana Siddhi Samarasya Kathanam. Jnana Siddhi Samarasya Kathanam. The compatibility between Jnana and Siddhis. Is it okay to have Siddhis? Does the one who is abiding in knowledge, does he exhibit the occult powers or does he not exhibit occult powers? This is the question. However, before this question is asked by Muni, Ganapati Muni to Bhagavan, Muni describes a setting in which he has asked this question. It is a night when he is alone with Bhagavan, and he begins with singing the praises of Bhagavan, singing the praises of Bhagavan's abidance, steady abidance in the self, which is so difficult for even great yogis to attain. He says such abidance is difficult even for yogis to attain, and this spontaneous abidance in the self has been attained by Bhagavan even when he was a boy of 16. And then Muni goes on to describe his vision of Bhagavan as Subramanya, as Lord Subramanya. And he tells us how Lord Subramanya had appeared in earlier incarnations as Kumarilla Bhatta, as also Sanat Kumara, and as Jnana Sambandha. This is Muni's vision of Bhagavan. And after the vision of Bhagavan, Muni then goes on to ask his question. Now, it is in today's satsang, in the first half of the satsang, we were told by Bhagavan that we should not hold on to any concept whatsoever. And here we have Muni describing his vision of Bhagavan, seeing Bhagavan as Subramanya, also singing the glory of Bhagavan as the Sadguru. So where do the two concepts or the two teachings of Bhagavan or the two visions converge? If we see, we understand that the Bhagavan talking to us about the experience which is beyond all concepts. He, in fact, even in Ramana Gita, we saw in the earlier chapters, in the very first chapter also, even the concept, even the division between This is Satya, this is Asatya, this is true, this is false. Bhagavan says these are only aids. And then in chapter 4, he says the concepts such as Aham Brahmasmi are also only aids, and nothing is equal to Atmanubhava. So, where does the worship of Bhagavan come in this practice where there is no duality at all? Bhagavan has told us in Ashtakam and in Upadesha Saram, of course, he describes worship. In Ulladu Narpadu also, Bhagavan says, so long as one is having a sense that one is a body, Sarupa Buddhihi, Jagadishwarecha, even the world has a form and God also has a form. We also find Bhagavan in a conversation with a gentleman who is an atheist, in the sense who says that God with form is not acceptable. Bhagavan says, if you can worship your own form, if you can bathe your own form, clothe your own form, decorate your own form, decorate this body, which is a mere, in a sense, a mere corpse, then why not give a form to God? Why not worship God with form? So, there is this sloka also in Anubandham, where Bhagavan says that we must have Anubhava of Advaita. However, we should not apply Advaita to our interactions in the world and never to our approach to the Sadguru, never to the Guru. Guru vidam Advaitam Parata Kodadu. We should not apply Advaita to the Guru, saying Guru and I are only one. That is in the manifestation, in the parlance of action, where we are acting. Of course, the Jnani, for the Jnani, Bhagavan has said in the very first chapter of Ramana Gita, there is nothing that is false, because everything is included in the self. In Ekanma Panchakam also, Bhagavan says that. With the awareness that everything is included in the self, Bhagavan glorifies Arunachala. Similarly, we find here Muni singing the glories of Bhagavan. Muni always glorifies Bhagavan. What do we learn from Muni? If we look at the contribution of Ganapati Muni to us, to the devotees of Bhagavan, generations of devotees of Bhagavan, yes, the first one is the name Ramana, that name with which we address him, that name which Nandakumarji often says, Kanakamma told him that name is not different from the self itself. So that name was given to us by Muni. The second is that Muni has sung many verses, composed many verses in praise of Bhagavan, which Bhagavan put together as Ramana Chatvarimshat after Muni's Mahasamadhi. So, the 40 verses on Bhagavan which Muni has composed, which are chanted at Sri Ramanashramam also every day, that has given us a method, a path of worshipping Bhagavan, of singing the glory of Bhagavan. And we find that such glory is being sung by Muni in the 11th chapter of Ramana Gita and also in the 18th chapter of Ramana Gita. What is the significance of such glory? Every time we look at that glory of Bhagavan, what is it that is being glorified? Actually, that Atmanishtha is being glorified. That state of Bhagavan, that steady state of self-abidance is being glorified. It is not the form of Bhagavan as a limited form that is being glorified. It is the self itself which is being glorified. Subbaraya Sharma often says, the knower of the self is verily the self. So when we sing the glories of Bhagavan, when we praise Bhagavan, when we sing about Bhagavan, we are actually singing about the self, praising the self, glorifying the self and the self alone. That is why these verses are a part of the Ramana Gita, and we also saw how in looking at these verses we understand two things. One, we understand the beauty of surrender and how the Sadguru, remaining in that state where he requires nothing at all, out of pure compassion, which is totally natural, has opened out the path for all of us and is continuously available to all of us, drawing us back to that truth. And of course, we see the glory of self-abidance. Why is it so important to see the glory of self-abidance? Because everything else appears to be so attractive. What we can see with our eyes, what we can experience with our five senses, seems to be very attractive. But when we see the Jivan Mukta, when we dwell on the charitra, the life of the Jivan Mukta, the glory of the Jivan Mukta, it becomes evident to us, hey, all this is not as glorious as that. That is so glorious. Here is this young boy, as Muni says, Balya eva mahayashaha, even as a boy of 16, there he was, abiding ever in the self, unaware of everything happening to the body, unaware of verminating his body. Totally, what is the bliss of that self? What could be the bliss of that self that makes this possible? This question arises in our minds when we dwell on Bhagavan's glory, and Bhagavan is being asked here whether the Jnani can perform siddhis. When that self itself is the greatest siddhi, Satayeva siddhi. All other swapnopamanaha khalu siddhayonyaha. Swappanamam, they are all just like dream, says Bhagavan. In Ulladu Nalpadu again, all siddhis are just like the dream because they are within the framework of the dream life. But Bhagavan says over here, after having looked at the Muni with great intensity, Gabhiraya Drisha Vikshya Mamidam Vakyam Abravit. In an earlier chapter, we found that Bhagavan had said, Abhishikya Katakshena. Muni had described the glance of Bhagavan. He bathed me. He just actually poured his glance of grace on me. Here, Muni says, Gabhiraya Drishaviksha. With great majesty, Bhagavan looked at me and said, Sahajam sthiti marudha swabhavena dine dine tapascharati durdharsham nalasyam sahajasthitau. Because Bhagavan is saying that state of sahaja nishtha is not a lazy state. It is not one of being lazy, of doing nothing. That is, those who are in that swabhavena dine dine, those who are abiding in that all the time, tapascharati durdharsham, they are performing the most difficult penance. Those who are abiding constantly in the self are performing the greatest austerity. It is not a state of passiveness, it is not a state of non action, it is not a state of laziness. Na alasyam sahajasthita. Why does Bhagavan give this as the first answer to me? Because it appears, why should a jnani perform any siddhi? Why should a jnani do anything at all? Why should a jnani engage in any activity? Because we feel there is something great in that. There is something magnificent in that. There is something worthwhile in that. There is something worth achieving in that. We believe there is something worth achieving in all our actions. We believe, we sometimes feel, we often feel the presence of grace only when our desires are fulfilled. We do not feel the presence of grace in the being of the self, which is actually the greatest grace, which is actually grace itself. But we do not feel it in being. We feel it in doing. We feel it in achieving. So Bhagavan is saying here very compassionately, with his majestic glance, he says that just being in the self, that abidance is great tapas. It is a great penance. It is not a lazy state. The one who is ever abiding in the self is performing the greatest penance spontaneously, says Bhagavan. And that kind of tapas, what does tapas do? What does penance do for us? Penance burns away all the ills. Tapa is burning. Penance is to burn away all the ills. And what is the tapas of the Jivan Mukta doing for all of us? It is actually burning away the ills of the entire universe. So, what further siddhi has to be performed? Bhagavan is implying thus by his answer, first answer to Muni. And here he has also revealed a secret that it's a state of constant vigilance, constantly being in the self. Bhagavan says it's not like it's over and done with, it's happened, nothing further to do. It's a continuous tapasya, says Bhagavan, just abiding, holding the self, being the self. It is sahaja, it is natural. It is not with effort, this also Bhagavan says. But even to remain as that which is natural, Bhagavan says that is the greatest penance. It is greater than doing anything which is unnatural, which is achieved, which is created, and therefore will be destroyed, will disappear at some point of time. So Bhagavan also is giving to us here the glory of self-abidance. If we see that glory in him externally, he is turning our minds back, as he always does, to it internally as our own true nature. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Aparasachit Sukavaridashe Yasyormimatrum Bhuvanam Samastha गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. Namo Ramana, Namo Ramana to all.
Namo Ramana.